Welcome to The Audit, presented by IT Audit Labs. I am your producer, Joshua Schmidt. I'm joined today by Nick Mellum and Cameron Birkeland. We're here to chat about the news today. We're going to talk today about CrowdStrike. We're going to talk about Apple's new OS, Sequioa, the DOJ, an FTC sued TikTok, and we might even get into a conversation about password managers. But first, I wanted to do a little icebreaker and ask you guys if you have done anything fun this summer. We're kind of in the dog days of summer here. It's first week of August is over. Have you done anything fun, or you got any big plans for the fall, Nick?
Well, I'm just going to shout out that it's super hot in Texas, so I've been staying inside a little bit more. August is the worst month, so it's consistently around 100, which thank God for AC. But I haven't done anything probably notable, but I did get just on Tuesday Starlink internet. That's the satellite internet for backup. So I've been toying with that. So I've kind of been using that as the backup, especially if any systems go down, just as a secondary device. But I guess that's just my notable tech fun that I've had over the past week.
The reason I ask is I just got back from a camping trip. So we took our two daughters out into the woods. We did 2 nights. We were thinking about extending it to a third night in northern Minnesota, but we were pretty well exhausted by the end of the second day, full day in the woods. But there's nothing better than swimming in a lake, in a nice, crisp, clean northern Minnesota lake. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I also like to paddle the canoe around and listen to the loons late at night by the campfire. It's a lot of work getting the car loaded up and everything and packed up and all the food. It's quite the list, but it's always worth it when we get there. And but now I'm home, back to work. How about you, Cameron? You got any big plans this fall or done anything of note this summer?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my summer's been it feels like it's going away. It's already so cold today. I'm wearing a sweater here.
Yeah, it does feel like September
up in northern Minnesota.
It's actually kind of refreshing, though.
Well, that's true, because it was a little unbearably hot for a little bit there. So I've just feel like I'm running to some family event every weekend, and now everything's just gone by so quickly. I'm trying to recoup what's left of summer. I want to try to do something. So I'm hoping to go out. My grandma lives on a lake up here. She has a pontoon, so I want to try to get out there at least a couple weekends this summer.
The water's still warm.
So. But I saw that the algae is starting to come out, so it's getting a little dirty.
That will happen.
This summer is dwindling for you guys.
Are you a state fair guy, Cameron?
Oh, I have gone probably twice in my life.
Wow.
Okay.
And I was thinking about going this year, but I don't have anybody to go with yet. I haven't found anybody that wants to go, so I might not end up going.
Are you good with kids? You could help us with our crew. If you want to come with us.
Yeah.
Nick, sorry, what were you saying?
No, I was just going to say that haven't made it to the Texas State Fair yet, but I think we're going to try this year. I think it's in October, and it's like almost a month long. So looking forward to doing that. The big fair, I would say, down here closer to Houston is the rodeo in February, which is basically another state fair. So fun, good times, a lot of crowds. So it's kind of get what you want, walk around, see what you want to see, and that's that.
Do you have a belt buckle, Nick?
I don't. I have not earned one yet, so I might have to jump in the ring with the rodeo clowns.
You have to get one as the size of like a pancake.
I'll see what I can do before our next live.
All hat, no cattle.
I got a hat. It's downstairs. No belt buckle.
Stetson?
No. I can't remember what Resistol, I think is how they say it.
Yeah, you got to have some boots too, probably.
Oh, yeah. Multiple pairs.
That's a standard issue for Texans, I suppose.
Standard issue, yeah. You got to have a good pair of boots. Good one for around the house doing some chores, and another pair to take the wife out.
Take the cats out.
Yep. You got to take the cats for a walk. You needed a good pair of boots.
I always thought it was cool, those rattlesnake boots that have like the actual rattles, or the cobra, or maybe they're python or cobra or something, that actually have the snake on the toe.
You can get any flavor of boot you could ever want.
We got to get a pair of those for Eric to be walking around the office with.
Let's get that project underway. Maybe an early Christmas gift or something.
That's on you, man. I think you got the outlets for that down there. So
we can put the IT Auto Labs logo on the side of the boot, and
made out of snake skin for sure.
You'll be in on it.
Sure. All right. Well, I hope he's listening. Eric's taking the day off today, so I hope he's resting up. We're going to jump right into it. So, cybersecurity company CrowdStrike has published its root cause analysis detailing the Falcon sensor software update crash that crippled millions of Windows devices globally. I'm sure we all know someone that had a rough flight or a delayed vacation. So it gets a little technical here, and I'm going to rely on you guys to break this down for us. So it says the channel file 291 incident, as originally highlighted in its preliminary post-incident review, has been traced back to the content validation issue that arose after it introduced a new template type to enable visibility into the detection of novel attack techniques that abuse named pipes and other Windows inter-process communication mechanisms. That goes right over my head. Can one of you guys jump in and break down what's going on here and what this article is talking about?
Yeah, I think we can talk about this a little bit. So essentially, with the way the CrowdStrike Falcon works is it needs like the lowest level of access to the system possible to be able to fully see everything that's going on for visibility purposes. So it runs as a driver. It runs in the kernel. What this ends up meaning is that any code that it executes, it's kind of up to it to validate it, right? Usually, normal application on the system is going to have checks and balances, whereas where the CrowdStrike agent is running, it's kind of running unchecked, right? It's up to itself to check it. And what CrowdStrike was doing was pushing out sort of updates to these devices. And it was doing it. They were validating everything on their end, but what ended up happening was their validation process didn't catch this one little thing, and they pushed it out to all customers at once. The update wasn't actually tested on any live systems. They just put it through their proprietary validation process and then pushed it out to everybody all at once and sort of found out what would happen in a real world scenario as it happened.
It says further down in the article here too, where it opposed to the 20 supplied content. Yeah, right. That's next paragraph right there versus the 21 that were in this update, and the 21st portion of it was the one that actually crashed the systems.
Yep. So to get a little more technical with it, ultimately what happens was an out of bounds. So the CrowdStrike agent was expecting 20 input fields, right? And it reserved enough memory for those 20. And the new update required 21. So it read past that memory that it had reserved. That 21st pushed it outside of the reserved memory. And that's what caused the crash. And since it's running in the kernel, there's essentially, it essentially just has to take down the whole system.
Right, which is unfortunate. Obviously, that's why we kind of use that method of, let's say you have one big square and then you have a square in the center, right? And the square in the center is like the kernel, right? Where you have the keys to the kingdom, you have systems like Falcon running in there, what you want most secure. And everything outside of that center box is going to be like Office, Teams, Word, things like that. And if they fail in the outer ring, it just brings on that application. And that's what we want, right? We want those lower hanging fruit ones. They can fail outside, and that's fine. That we can troubleshoot it. If it's running in the kernel, like CrowdStrike, Falcon, there's no way around it. It craps everything out. Everything goes dark. So that's why everybody was getting the blue screen. And even if you didn't get the blue screen, you were still affected. And we saw this in all healthcare, flights. I know even a family member of mine, this is, not a critical system, but was going to their service provider to get a new cell phone, not knowing that this happened because they're not in the tech industry. And there was a big sign on the door that said, basically, we can't help you, so go home. And, I'm sure we all have people that were affected by it, but I think that's the basis, Josh, of what had happened, what Cam and I were just talking about. So lots of people affected and probably still dealing with it now.
Was this like worst case scenario, or could it have been worse? Because it seemed to be really disruptive, across the entire globe.
I think this was pretty worst case for this. This was as real as it gets, obviously, because so many things were down, critical systems. And this was a real life tabletop exercise that people were flung into in the middle of the night. And I think people thought it was either a cyber attack or, an outage that they were having. Overnight people, IT guys, gals, were flung into action and had to start troubleshooting things right away. So I think this is as real as it gets. I think a lot of people were thinking we were under attack, right? We're in World War III was kicking off. Systems were going down all over the place. But you got anything to add to that, Cam?
Yeah, no, it's pretty crazy how that one little thing ended up causing such a huge domino effect. It took down some critical systems and caused an incredible amount of disruption. And there's been a lot of, I would say, criticism of Microsoft and maybe even CrowdStrike as well on having that kernel level access for that reason.
Right.
Because obviously there was some validation, some checking that should have happened that didn't. I think this was ultimately preventable, but it happened. And so now we kind of have to go back and look at how could this be prevented. Ideally, I think some people say that there should be a sort of API for these things, right? Like do we really need to have the Falcon sensor running in the kernel, like as a driver? Shouldn't it have some sort of API to be able to access the system and prevent that kind of level of damage? Or, and at the same time, CrowdStrike should probably do a little better with their testing methodology and make sure that they're not pushing out updates to every single customer at the same time without any real world validation.
Yeah, it was there. No matter which way you cut it, there's probably going to be a lot of after actions on how we can prevent these things from happening. But I agree with Cam. Does it actually need kernel level access? That's something we need to discuss. But I think flinging into action, a lot of industries, found there's strong individuals that were ready to react to this. Cam and I work for a pretty big organization that we were involved with remediation. Cam more so than I. My role basically in it was getting BitLocker keys for all the down computers and sending them to the techs on the ground at the site, because we had essentially strike teams out to, bring back servers and everything that was affected. And then we also had, let's say, 2,500 to 3,000 machines blue screen. We had to set up locations for individuals to come in and rectify this. Luckily, I'm remote and I did not get affected with the blue screen. So I was able to help pretty quickly getting those BitLocker keys to come back online. But Cam, you were boots on the ground, correct?
Yeah. So for me, I guess it ended up similar with what happened to me was I had my workstation shut down overnight. So when I had booted it up in the morning, it had already been reverted. And so I didn't end up being affected by that blue screen. So I was able to hop online. By the time I was up, it was like 7 a.m. at that point. So people were already, in calls and trying to figure things out. Luckily, I was able to get online. Wasn't able to get onto the network, of course, because VPN wasn't working. Was able to use Teams and Outlook, and that's about it.
Yeah, so I got a very frantic call from one of our colleagues pretty early in the morning, and you definitely thought something big was kicking off, and the frantic voice was well warranted. So there's still so much cleanup to do. I think the biggest question that we're dealing with is how do we prevent it? But we could probably talk about this for a whole episode. It's been affecting industries all over the world. And as we know, CrowdStrike is heavily involved with Microsoft. And, it's going to probably continue that way. But, just affecting so many different industries. The scary thing is like the healthcare industry, right? on surgical tables or whatever, people that use computer access for whatever the reason might be in those situations. We certainly want to safeguard those industries. Not that they're more important, than others, but critically life-saving devices, right, running on software like this is rather scary.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's also important to mention what CrowdStrike's changing after this, some changes they've started implementing. I don't believe they're going to be rolling out updates like these anymore to all customers. Some customers have staging environments, right? This update obviously did not utilize any of that. So now you're going to have the opportunity to actually apply the update to a set of development systems, for example, before it takes down your entire network. I think CrowdStrike's going to take that a little more seriously.
I think it's kind of alarming too, just to show, and you don't have to be in the IT industry to understand this, but just how easy this was to happen, right? It was an update. Yeah. It ran out of memory when it was doing the update, and it brought so many industries to their knees that require this software. Well, require a computer, I should say, because it brought everything down. So just showing how easy it is to bring those things down shows the weakness that you can have, right? Especially for a critical infrastructure. Like, we have an article that we could discuss later about the water industry, right? Critical infrastructure like that goes down, that's running this kind of software is, very alarming.
Yep. And that's the big takeaway I've heard from a lot of people outside of the cybersecurity industry as well, is, if it took this one little thing to take down so much stuff, how vulnerable are we? And how easy is it for a nation state to do something like this in a malicious manner?
Right. Yep. Insider threat, you think about all those things.
Yep.
If it was as easy to push an update to bring it down and have that kind of effect, we need to work on, policies, procedures, know-how, having these conversations regularly. And we had a real life tabletop exercise, but I think doing this more regularly, right, in a practice environment, what are we going to do if this situation happens again? You can use this as, instruction, or look at this, do an after actions report on what happened, and then, practice, right? Let's use this as an example. And how are we going to spring into action next time something like this happens? Hopefully it doesn't. I feel like we should be preparing like this is possible every day. So just using this as a good example to practice on what we should be doing day in and day out, especially if you're in the IT industry.
It seems to me that Cameron said it could have been prevented. It was a preventable situation, but my mind goes to just the ingenuity of human error is so vast that it's hard to account for everything. I was just talking to a buddy who lives in Arizona, and they have the self-driving cars there, right? And then you can take the taxi with the self-driving car, and these cars are still making mistakes, and they're still learning and gathering that data. But the conversation revolved around it had gotten pulled over, by a police, no one in the driver's seat, because it had made a bad move. It was waiting in an intersection or something like that it thought someone was crossing, but there was no one there, so the car was sitting in the intersection or something like that. But it's kind of hard to account for all of the crazy ways things can go wrong when there's just an infinitesimal amount of opportunities to fail. So, but yeah, crazy that this little human error that seemingly could have been prevented caused such a big dramatic outage. And I hope that it kind of informs people going forward that to be on top of these things a little bit better, or don't roll out your updates to everybody. I'm really quite surprised to hear that.
Well, and if we're gonna do it, let's not do it on a Friday. Let's schedule this for like a Tuesday or something.
Yeah, that was definitely the best part, right? Is that it was on a Friday.
Do you think some of that is the climate that we're in, of just rolling things out, letting the people be the beta?
Yeah, and I mean, CrowdStrike's always trying to be on the bleeding edge, right? They're trying to stay competitive, so they don't want to fall behind.
speaking of which, that segues us to our next article.
Perfect segue.
Yeah, perfect segue to yet another iteration of Mac OS. This time it's Sequioa.
Yep.
I think they have so many updates rolling out, they're going to run out of like California type names to call their OS.
I love how they explain it, where they're talking about like all the engineers get into a van or whatever. They talk about this in their keynotes, and they do whatever. They come up with these names. It's obviously a joke, but it's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's Catalina. Now it's Sequoia. What was it like?
They even have animal names. They've had all kinds of things.
Yeah, tiger, leopard, snow leopard.
Snow leopard. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
Wasn't there one that was this wine country recently, like Sedona? No, that's
no. There was one like that.
I can't think of it. What's the wine?
I had a weird one called Maverick. I think that was a while ago. That was the only one I can remember that wasn't a place or an animal.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, we're on Sequoia now, I guess. So I have to keep a close eye on my updates. I have mine turned off on my Mac just because I don't want to be running into any issues. But we'll talk about that in a second. Apple's new Mac OS Sequoia tightens gatekeeper controls to block unauthorized software. Apple on Tuesday announced an update to its next generation Mac OS version that makes it a little more difficult for users to override gatekeeper protections. Gatekeeper is a crucial line of defense built into Mac OS designed to ensure that only trusted apps run on the operating system. When an app is downloaded from the outside of the App Store and opened for the first time, it verifies the software is from an identified developer. A couple things I want to throw at you guys, and maybe we can, pass it back and forth a little bit. There was the first thing I mentioned of, just rolling out these continual security updates, seemingly because they're patching up vulnerabilities and whatnot. In this case, with third-party software, you can run into the problem, which I have frequently, of getting an automatic update on my computer and then trying to sign into a recording software, or maybe you're a gamer. I'm sure this happens to gamers, or any kind of third-party software that might require some hardware or some firmware. And those developers aren't on the ball, or just don't have the budget, or aren't aware that there's an update being rolled out. And all of a sudden it renders your software unusable. It happened to me with Final Cut Pro. I was bellying up to the office computer here for a little editing work, and lo and behold, the Final Cut Pro would just not open after my last update. It would roll through all my third-party plugins, which are meant for audio editing and whatnot, and then it would just stall. Ended up getting to the boss level IT people at Mac, where they take over your computer to figure out what's going on, and the guy you could tell he had already done like 200 of these calls that week. And he was just like, yeah, we already have it documented, so you're just going to have to wait until they update. And I'm like, really? I can't work on my project today? You don't have a workaround
for me?
Yeah, because on Logic Pro and some of the other proprietary apps, they have at least like a command period, while you're booting up, where you can get around scanning third-party software.
Sure. Yep.
But they didn't have that, or still don't seemingly have that for Final Cut Pro. So that's the first problem, right? Have you guys run into anything like that? I know you're not a Mac user, Cameron. Do you find that on Microsoft products as well, or?
Yeah, I only use Windows ultimately. I can't say I've ran into anything specifically like that, but I think it is, it has a lot to do with the separate ecosystems, like Apple wanting to keep everything locked down, secure. Microsoft has to keep things a little more open, I would say, because of all the, the larger amount of users that are using their software. Windows is designed to be compatible with a larger number of devices, that sort of thing. So this seems like a very much an Apple thing to me, at least at first glance.
I've run into this issue, but it's kind of because of my own doing. And I say that because I like to run the beta software. So like I have the latest beta software on my phone. On my Mac right now that I'm on Sequoia, the beta software, to test the new things out. It's running very smooth, but on the Mac, I haven't had any issues, but on my phone, I've had some, apps that I use daily. Every now and again, if you update to the newest beta, they don't open, right? They just crash right away. Luckily, none of those have been critical, but I haven't had anything directly affect me like you're talking about, Josh. But I think a lot of times what I see, and this is, going back years and years is, let's say on an iPhone, you open it up and you had the new software install overnight, and the next day or the day after that, you might get a quick update and said, oh, we have to patch something. There's a security patch for something we found in the latest update. So they're quickly going to another update. So, it's not directly affecting an application, and it kind of goes back, segueing to CrowdStrike. These updates come out so quick and they have to patch something that just came out. So there's a lot going on here, but
yeah, you get the update when you wake up in the morning and you're like on version 0.3 before lunchtime.
Right.
The other workaround, I kind of forgot to mention this. Some of my buddies had the same issue. They were literally having to uninstall their OS and then go install a prior iteration of the operating system just to get their apps to work. Yep. I was not willing to go there because that just seems like way too much.
You just wanted to wait it out.
Yeah, I just seemed like something could go wrong. Although I'm pretty diligent about backing up all my data. I usually do too. Yeah, since I have so many sessions and things like that I just can't lose, or I might need to reference 2 years from now or 3 years from now. I store all my sessions on two external hard drives, and a cloud. And I really try to take like 2 or 3 times a year to go through all my data and make sure that it's backed up at least twice. But yeah, that's not really helpful if you can't open up the app. So
no, that's good practice though, to do that.
Yeah. Well, Cameron, you kind of brought up that it's kind of all in the ecosystem. And I think that's another one of the issues, or could be seen as an issue, right? It's like now there's kind of this gatekeeping, pun intended, around what can be accepted onto the App Store. Like, what can you actually use on your Mac? If you're a Mac user, you probably are okay with that to some degree, but you might run into an instance where you want to use something that's not approved by the powers that be on the Apple side of things, and that could be politically, that could just be for edging out competition for their own apps. It's kind of probably
they are going through a little bit of a issue right now with a major entities trying to sue them for this. So there is probably some fruit to that.
It's probably more cost effective for them to kind of ride that edge though, right? And like just be the cutting edge. And if they have to take on a couple lawsuits, so be it. We'll kind of figure it out as we go. Yeah, well, here's something I hope we don't have to deal with forever, but it seems like we might. Nick and I are parents, so this is something that's hits close to home for us. Good to know, though, the DOJ and FTC sued TikTok for violating children privacy laws. As of August 3rd, this came out. The U.S. Department of Justice, along with the Federal Trade Commission, filed a lawsuit against popular video sharing platform and TikTok for flagrantly violating children's privacy laws in the country. The agency claims the company knowingly permitted children to create TikTok accounts and to view and share short-form videos and messages with adults and others on the service. Yikes. I don't use TikTok often. I do post a few things on there and then immediately scrub it from my phone. But one of my first questions for you guys was like, we know this is not just TikTok, violating these things. Why do you think that we see so much about TikTok, maybe not as much these days about Facebook and Instagram? Because Zuckerberg was getting a lot of heat until TikTok really took off. I feel like he's been a little bit more low key.
I think you're onto something there. And TikTok is casting a shadow over a lot of these other applications, and really for all the wrong reasons. It's always in the limelight for something. And with all the users of all ages, it's like the cool thing is to have a TikTok and do their dances or whatever they do. I don't use TikTok myself, but I think that's a lot of the reason we hear it. TikTok was also just like in front of Congress. I think it was like 6 months ago for these issues like this. And it's alarming that it's involving children, right? I mean, if you're 16, 17, 18, right, you can kind of think for yourself a little bit more, but a lot of these were kids 13 and under, utilizing TikTok, harvesting data and whatnot, but there's a lot to chew on for sure here.
Yeah, I think TikTok I feel like it's been in the news just constantly for years now, just related to all these privacy concerns. And on one hand, the kind of stuff that TikTok collects is kind of in the nature of the application, right? I think Facebook, Google, they all have their own versions of TikTok now, and I'm sure they all collect similar. But I know that one big concern with TikTok is that it's not based in the United States, or it wasn't in the first place. Whereas our Facebook and Google and stuff, that's at least on our own soil.
Yeah, so the conversation really always is shifting to national security. What are they listening? Yep. What are they spying on? So I think a lot of the threat is somebody needs to buy, or if they want to force a sale of TikTok, it sounds like, to somebody like Microsoft or something, yep. U.S. stateside. But I think that's the big reason, Josh, at least from my mind, is the buzzword of national security is why this is getting so much more attention.
Yep.
And it makes the politicians kind of look like they're being hard on China, maybe, or at least have their.
If we want to go there, I'm sure that's probably could be. Yes.
Well, yeah, and that's both sides of the aisle too, right?
It should be. Yep.
Yeah, because ultimately we want our own spyware, right? Not theirs.
I'm surprised no one's come up with a competitor yet. There's things that Instagram and YouTube are doing to compete.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many that have copied the format. Like that's how pretty much all short videos are displayed now.
You have YouTube has their shorts, Instagram has reels.
Yep.
Yeah, they're all doing it.
Yep. It's whoever has the best algorithm.
Yeah, it seems like it's peaked a little bit. I know I did read an article recently that although they have leaned into that short form content, that long format content like our podcast is still just as relevant and doing well in a different way. It's reaching a different audience, and people sign on to look for different things. I was going to ask if you use TikTok or if you have played around with it.
I have played around with it, but I don't use it. My wife does. I keep trying to get her to delete it, but they get all their ideas, whatever else for, kids' toys, snacks, you can get recipes and whatever else. They claim they can learn so much on TikTok. So whatever, but I do not use it personally, no.
Yeah, no, I don't use it either. My parents use it though. They've really gotten into TikTok. They like the whole, it's a constant stream of content. And of course it's perfect. It's always perfectly tailored to the person who's looking at it.
Yes.
Like the videos are very specifically picked out and there's something that you want to see. So it's easy to just keep swiping and watching. And
what I was going to say before, to me, the big takeaway here, right, is, we want to banning TikTok, right? I don't want to get preachy, but I think this just shows that this goes for everything. You have to protect yourself, right? We're depending on the DOJ and whoever else to potentially ban this. I know some states are even banning it, but it really shows that we need to govern what we're doing, not just be like, oh, I'm sure they're not doing anything bad with our data or whatever else. Really, it shows what's going on your kids' phones, yada, yada. And I think that segues into the password conversation about logging in and logging out of devices. But I think there's a lot here, like we talked about. I don't foresee it going away anytime soon because it is just a juggernaut of an application. So hopefully something can be, fixed by either a purchase or dissolving it into something else, like being absorbed to Instagram or Microsoft taking it over or something.
One of the big music companies, I can't remember who it was, I'll just leave that out, was recently, you can find it on Google with a quick search, took all their music off of TikTok, and musicians, artists freaked out because that's the best way to reach people right now. And I've even heard about people being signed by a record label that won't release their next single or their next album until they manufacture a viral TikTok moment.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they are since rectified that situation or sweetened the deal for them where they're allowing their music back on. I'm sure more money going into the pockets of the corporation, I would assume, because I haven't seen any windfall from the artist side of things, but unfortunately.
Wasn't this kind of like Vines? Do you guys remember Vines back in the day? I never really ever used that either, but I thought that it was similar, right? Artists could go on there, right? They post their music, they get discovered that way. So it just seems like this is maybe just a newer version of that. I could be wrong, just a side thought.
Yeah, no, I think that's a similar idea. Vines were limited to, I think, like 6 seconds,
Oh,
and I didn't even use it. I didn't even use it much when it was a thing, and of course, then it was gone before I was even able to download the app. Basically,
Was that a Twitter offshoot, Vines?
I don't remember.
yes. I don't know if it started out that way, but I know Twitter definitely acquired it at one point.
Okay. That may have been what tanked it. I actually was on tour in Texas, not too far from you, Nick, in Austin in 2016 or 15. We met Matt King, who was, you probably don't remember the name, but he was the Vine star at the time. He had like a video of him in the car, like doing this head bob thing with like a funny face. But that's my Vine story. I do remember Periscope on Twitter.
Yes,
do you remember Periscope?
Yep.
I may have known some people, not saying I did this, but I may have known some people that watched some free boxing matches on Periscope, got on some pay-per-view, and that got shut down rather quickly, I believe.
That was a Twitter. Periscope, wasn't that a Twitter offshoot as well?
Yeah, I believe it was. It was like a walkie-talkie feature, social media, where you could just video someone instantly and connect, but people were using it to broadcast, like I said, football games, and then, you got 100,000 people broadcasting a boxing match, and then they get shut down, and then 20,000 other ones spring up, and it was just like a game of whack-a-mole. So, another one of those circumstances where maybe you didn't think through all the consequences before rolling out the software.
I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, unfortunately.
I agree. But before we change topics, and I liked your segue about the password management, but before we segue, let's just remind our listeners what we can do with our kids, at least, to keep them safe. I want to give a shout out to our episode. I think it was in the 30s, maybe. It was Andre Champagne, or maybe it was even the late 20s. We had a guest named Andre Champagne who was a forensic cyber investigator for Cook County in Illinois. And a couple of the takeaways that he remembers, that I remember from his speech, was that, if you can help it, don't let your kids be in a locked room or a bedroom with a tablet or a phone or a computer. Put the stuff out in the living room, make it a public space use only for your kids, so you can monitor everything that's going on. Because, as parents, we all want to have privacy for our children, give them some freedom to go out into the world and kind of explore. But at the same time, it's really our job to make sure that they are not getting preyed upon or in any kind of trouble. So, at the end of the day, privacy is nice, but having your kids safe is probably a better option.
Nicer.
It's even nicer. Yeah. So that was one of the takeaways from that, I remember. Nick, do you remember any of the other ones that he had mentioned?
I don't remember anything that he mentioned, but I think, one of the, tips that comes to my mind is, I think it mentions it in the article here, is using the functionalities built into the app to either limit time, for the kids on there. So limit how much time they can actually spend on the app, because Cameron was talking about it. His folks use it, and you get to that rabbit hole, right? You just keep going. And, TikTok's issue with letting children under 13 use the application, it subjects them to adult content, right? Things that, maybe they shouldn't be seeing or aren't ready to see yet. So I think, using the functionality, the shared accounts, right? So you can see what they're seeing. You can review, the items that they have already seen or potentially could see. And then limiting the time they spend on the app, I think would be two big takeaways for me.
How about you, Cameron? Do you got any golden nuggets to share with our listeners?
No, I think you covered most of what I would say. Ultimately, it's just about limiting the screen time, because it's too easy to sit there for endless amounts of time, because the stream of content never ends.
Yeah, that's on the user side. But also thinking about, just on the privacy side, I've seen a lot of people, and trying not to cast any shade on these people because they're my friends, but people put, their child, right, we're about to head back into the back to school zone, right? And they have their kid there on the first day of school with a chalkboard or whatever, and it tells them who their teacher's name is and how old they are and their birthday and what school they're going to. And, and you're giving them all that information. You're giving everyone all that information. And, at the end of the day, the children have no consent over what is being shared. So, it's almost kind of as a benefit to your children, as fun as it is to get those likes and that dopamine hit and to share with everyone that your child is cute and growing up and you're doing a great job as a parent. I think it's even cooler to, really put their safety and protection first and maybe just share that. My wife and I use an app called Back Then. It's, still cloud storage. So we're still careful about what we post on there, but it's only shared with people that we let on there, friends and family. It's a great way to share those moments with people, but also still have them be a little more private. So
I think that was a good tip, Josh, that you brought up, censoring kind of what you're putting on there. In the military, we were trained on this. We would call it operational security, right? Don't post where you're going on an operation. If you're deploying, movements, it applies here. Maybe if you're taking a picture of your house, don't put the address on there. Wherever you're going or whatever you're doing, it's certainly like what you're saying, Josh, at your kid's school, your teacher's name, the address of the school. It really puts our kids into a sticky situation, right? That they, like you said, Josh, didn't consent to, they don't know about, right? They're young and, we don't even be subjecting our kids to, to that kind of behavior from, unknown entities.
I got one more for you, Cameron. Probably don't do this. You don't strike me as a guy that posts his food like Nick does. My last tip was to wait till you're done with your vacation to post your vacation pics. Wait till you get back home. Just stagger it by a week. If you go out of town, you don't need to tell everybody you're leaving that day. And that way you still get to share your trip if that's something that's important to you. But you're already home. So, it already happened. People don't need to know where you are all the time. Yep. And they
don't need to know that you're gone, that your house is empty.
Hey, my house is empty with all my stuff in it. And I'm not going to be home for a week because I'm in Hawaii or whatever. Yeah.
These are social engineering gold mines.
Yep.
I'm going to do a shout out to Eric Brown here and say, Nick, you need to start a TikTok account for Mr. Meowgi.
I was waiting for it. We made it in like 48 minutes before the cats got brought up. Shout out to EB out there.
All right. Well, we have one more thing to talk about that's been relevant to us, and we'll wrap it up with this today. I'll share my experience. I just switched over to BitWarden for all my passwords and cleaned up my security, and it was rather painless. It was just a little time consuming. I was a little freaked out to do it just because it's not fun downloading a CSV file and logging into 18 different websites and then looking at your phone, looking at your browser, trying to suss out how am I doing this? Because we get so used to how we log into things and we just want it to go quick because we're trying to get our work done or whatnot. But I'm happy. I'm switched over and still got a little bit of work to do. But yeah, I did realize I did need to download the desktop extension for my desktop and then a browser extension, for my mobile as well, and then the browser extension for whatever browser I was using within those devices. So it's kind of a multi-step process. So you got to have the main sign in and master key, but then you also kind of have to integrate them into your browser. But once you kind of get past that stage, I felt like it was very seamless. So when I'm now logging into websites, it's coming up right away. And I'm kind of back to where I was flying through websites. Do you guys use these? And do you have anything to add to the convo?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been using Password Manager, and it's BitWarden for quite a few years now. It was a situation where high school, I was, I had to have accounts for things. I would just, maybe use variations of a password that I used before. I never needed a password manager. I was like, that's too much work. Too much work to set up a password manager. And it can be, especially if your passwords aren't already stored somewhere. It can be a lot of work to start getting all that into a password manager like Bitwarden. So it ended up taking probably a few months for me to actually finally get all of my accounts in there, because they weren't all in a password manager before. But it's worth it. Once you have it set up, it's not only way more secure, every single password is different, but it's easy, right? You can use your fingerprint to unlock Bitwarden, and it autofills your passwords for you. So now it's like I lived without it for so long, now I can't live without it kind of thing. It's made life easier and more secure.
You hit it on the head, Cam. I was going to say that there's not many situations that you can say are more secure and easier.
Yeah. Right.
And here is a perfect example. I use one myself, but I'm going to go against the grain. I use Proton Pass. It works the same as Bitwarden, but I have it on my phone and all my computers, iPad, things like that. And I used to, this is probably 3-4 years ago now, I got all my passwords off Google and get the CSV implemented there. So it's pretty easy for me to switch over. I think one good thing about these services is they have a password generator built in. So your mom, dad, brother, sister, whoever, one of the big pieces of advice is we always give to anybody is to don't use the same password for every application or every website, so on and so forth. And this makes it really easy because it will suggest the password. You don't even need to think about it. It will autofill it, save it, put your email on as the username. So again, just another step easier. But if you're not using a password manager, highly recommend you start. And you don't need to spend a bunch of time getting set up. I think you can, if you start it and you can implement all the passwords you already have, but just let it evolve, right? Just keep getting passwords in there slowly as you create new accounts, things like that.
Yep. Did you, when you switched over, did you realize how many junk username and passwords you had? Because, when you update your password or you forget your password and then you go make a new one and it's still stored in that CVS file or in that passkey. So I've been sorting through tons of just junk username and login credentials.
Yeah, no, as time went on and I started adding more and more accounts to it, it became very clear how much of a problem my password practices were at the time.
Diming himself out.
There was a time when I typed in all my passwords and there was not that many variations. Obviously, after 4 years of going to school for cybersecurity, I cleaned that up a little bit.
Changes your tune pretty quick once you see how nasty it can get.
Yeah. Yep. So, and like, for example, Bitwarden has, it allows you to have some insights into password reuse and things like that. Mm-hmm. That's pretty common for most people. Most people are going to have a lot of password reuse. And if you're able to get all your passwords into a password manager, you can see the numbers. Like, here's how many times your password has been reused.
Right. Yep. I think even on the iPhone, it does that too. If you go into the passwords area on the phone, it will show you, I have 5, I have 20, I have 200 or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Passwords have been reused. And I think it even gives you an option and a link to change it, and it will automatically go to the website to help you update your password.
And that's what I was going to call out. That was the biggest pain, is to log into the website and then go change it because every website's different. The next level, I would love to, maybe this will get out across the algorithms to a developer at Bitwarden. I'm sure they thought of this, but wouldn't it be great if you could just change it right in the Bitwarden app or the Proton Mail app where you didn't even need to log into the website, whether it's Google or Netflix or whatever, it just pushed it out for you and you could do it all right there?
It could be slick. It sounds a little scary to me, having that connection. Make sure you have MFA set up.
Yep. MFA.
Cameron doesn't like that idea.
It makes me a little scared, but could we get there? Maybe.
I like the idea of the convenience of it, of course, but there's always the trade-off of convenience and security.
I'm going to say no, just because of all the connectors to that one, right, that it would take to get that to work. Again, fantastic idea. If you can implement it properly, you won't be sitting on this podcast anymore. But
the first one's free. I got a lot of ideas. This is why you guys are. This is why you guys are the experts, and I'm just the producer. So
it's a great idea. We'll leave it at that.
Hey, well, it's a great spot to leave it today. I had a lot of fun chatting with you guys. Yeah. We were joined by Cameron Berkland and Nick Mellon of IT Audit Labs. I'm your producer, Joshua Schmidt. Today, we've been talking about some news and then a little bit of extra about BitWarden and password managers. If you want to hear more, we have all of our episodes on Spotify, Apple, Amazon. You can find us on YouTube. We have shorts that come out, several every week. And please subscribe, like, and share it with your friends. You've been listening to The Audit presented by IT Audit Labs. Have a great day, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
You have been listening to The Audit, presented by IT Audit Labs. We are experts at assessing risk and compliance while providing administrative and technical controls to improve our clients' data security. Our threat assessments find the soft spots before the bad guys do, identifying likelihood and impact, while our security control assessments rank the level of maturity relative to the size of your organization. Thanks to our devoted listeners and followers, as well as our producer, Joshua J. Schmidt, and our audio-video editor, Cameron Hill. You can stay up to date on the latest cybersecurity topics by giving us a like and a follow on our socials and subscribing to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you source your security content.